A bear begs soldier for help. What happens next is unbelievable. 3 soldiers lowered their weapons in disbelief as a fully grown brown bear crashed through their security fence, ran straight to their commander's office, and did something no wild animal had ever done before. It bowed its head and waited. When they discovered why this 800-pound predator risked death to seek human help, even the toughest military men couldn't hold back their tears. Lieutenant Scott Parker had seen his fair share of strange events during his 15 years in the military, but nothing in his experience could explain what was happening at Outpost 23. Hidden deep in Alaska's unforgiving wilderness, their base had dealt with everything from severe blizzards to unauthorized aircraft, but a bear deliberately breaking through their defenses only to show submission? This was completely unheard of. The base was one of America's most secure facilities in the region, equipped with motion sensors, electric fencing, and round-the-clock armed patrols. Its primary mission was to monitor a vast stretch of wilderness bordering sensitive territories. With 15 highly trained soldiers and state-of-the-art surveillance equipment, they prided themselves on detecting any threat long before it reached their perimeter. Yet on this freezing morning, all their sophisticated security measures meant nothing against the determination of one desperate mother bear. The base's alarms had barely finished sounding when she appeared, not with aggression or fear, but with a purpose that would soon become clear to everyone present. What unfolded over the next 72 hours would not only challenge everything these hardened soldiers believed about wild animals, but would also lead to a discovery that would shake the entire military command. Lieutenant Parker was about to learn that sometimes the greatest acts of courage come from the most unexpected sources. Lieutenant Parker's first instinct was to follow standard military protocol, neutralize any threat that breached their security. But something about this bear's behavior made him hesitate. The massive animal wasn't charging or attacking. Instead, it remained in a submissive position, occasionally lifting its head to make soft, almost pleading sounds that echoed through the silent compound. The base's wildlife expert, Sergeant James Miller, quickly pointed out how extraordinary this behavior was. Brown bears were known for their aggressive territorial nature, especially when cornered. They never willingly approached human settlements unless searching for food, and they certainly never showed submissive behavior to humans. This bear was breaking every rule they knew about wild animal behavior. As the morning wore on, more unusual details emerged. The bear's fur was matted with ice and snow, suggesting it had traveled a long distance. Its paw prints in the snow showed it had circled the base multiple times before making its desperate entry. Most striking was the lack of fear it showed, despite being surrounded by armed soldiers. The bear's eyes seemed to carry an intelligence and urgency that made even the most experienced soldiers uncomfortable. Lieutenant Parker ordered his men to maintain their positions but hold their fire. He had served in many challenging situations before, but this one required a different kind of approach. The bear's desperate action suggested it wasn't just a random encounter. There had to be a reason for such unusual behavior. The base's security cameras revealed more puzzling details. Footage from the previous night showed the bear had actually been observing the base for hours, studying the patrol patterns and movement of personnel. This level of calculated behavior was unprecedented. It was almost as if the bear had planned its approach, waiting for the right moment to make its dramatic entrance. Sergeant Miller noticed something else. The bear was a nursing mother. Her behavior suggested she had cubs somewhere, but no young bears were visible in any of the security footage. This detail changed everything. If she had left her cubs behind to seek human help, something serious must have happened. The situation became even more intriguing when they reviewed thermal imaging from their perimeter cameras. The bear's body temperature showed signs of exhaustion, suggesting she had been traveling for many hours without rest. The tracks in the snow supported this theory. They stretched far into the wilderness, following a winding path that seemed to have a specific destination. As the hours passed, the bear's behavior became increasingly urgent. She would rise occasionally, walk a few steps toward the wilderness, then return to her submissive position, all while making those same pleading sounds. It was as if she was trying to communicate something specific, trying to get them to follow her. The base's communication officer reported the incident to regional command, but the response they received only added to the tension. No other military installation or civilian settlement in the area had ever reported anything similar. This was completely uncharted territory. Lieutenant Parker knew he had to make a difficult choice. Military protocol strictly prohibited leaving the base for unauthorized missions, especially to follow a wild animal. But his years of experience had taught him that sometimes the most important decisions weren't found in any manual. After 6 hours of observing the bear, Parker called an emergency meeting with his senior staff. The discussion was intense, with opinions divided. Some argued it was too risky to leave the base's security for what might be a wild goose chase. Others believed they had a moral obligation to investigate, especially if cubs were involved. The debate continued until Sergeant Miller shared a disturbing observation. The bear's urgency was increasing, and she showed signs of physical distress. Parker thought about his 20 years of military service. He had faced combat situations, natural disasters, and countless emergencies. But this situation was different. This wasn't about military strategy or following protocol. It was about doing what was right. Looking at his team, he saw the same understanding in their eyes. Making his decision, Parker organized a small rescue team. He selected 4 of his most experienced soldiers, including Sergeant Miller for his wildlife expertise. They equipped themselves with medical supplies, emergency rations, tranquilizer guns, and survival gear. Nobody knew what they might find, but they needed to be prepared for anything. Before leaving, Parker established strict protocols. He set up a communication schedule with the base, arranged for emergency backup if needed, and created a detailed map of their planned route based on the bear's tracks. The remaining soldiers would maintain heightened alert at the base, ready to respond if anything went wrong. As they prepared to leave, the bear's behavior changed dramatically. She became more animated, as if sensing their decision to help. Her distressed sounds turned to soft huffs, and she began moving toward the tree line, constantly looking back to ensure they were following. The tracking would not be easy. The winter storm had intensified, reducing visibility and making the terrain treacherous. The bear's tracks showed she had come from the northwest, through some of the most challenging terrain in the area. The team would need to navigate dense forest, steep inclines, and possibly unstable ice formations. What made the situation even more complicated was the approaching darkness. In the Alaskan winter, daylight was precious and brief. They would have only a few hours before darkness fell, making their mission even more dangerous. Parker knew they were racing against time. The bear seemed to understand their challenges. She moved at a pace that allowed them to follow safely, occasionally stopping to ensure they were still behind her. Her behavior continued to amaze the team. This was no mindless animal, but a creature showing remarkable intelligence and purpose. As they moved deeper into the wilderness, Parker noticed something else concerning. The bear's tracks showed she had made this journey multiple times over the past few days. Whatever was driving her to seek human help must have been desperately important for her to repeat this exhausting journey. The team maintained radio contact with the base as they moved through the forest. Every 15 minutes, they reported their position and status. The bear led them through paths that seemed deliberately chosen for human passage, avoiding the deadliest hazards of the winter landscape. After nearly 2 hours of careful tracking, they reached a point where the terrain began to change. The dense forest opened into a small clearing, and the bear's behavior became more agitated. She moved with increased urgency, her powerful muscles tense with anticipation. The team readied themselves, checking their equipment one final time. Whatever they were about to discover, it had driven a wild animal to do the unthinkable: trust humans. As they approached the clearing, none of them were prepared for the shocking scene that awaited them. What the rescue team found in that clearing would haunt them for years to come. There, trapped in an old abandoned mining shaft, were 2 bear cubs, barely moving in the freezing temperatures. The shaft, a relic from Alaska's gold rush era, had partially collapsed, creating a deadly trap for the young bears. The cubs had fallen through a hidden opening, dropping nearly 15 feet into the frozen pit. The walls of the shaft were too smooth and steep for them to climb out, and too narrow for their mother to reach down and help them. The mother bear had been forced to watch helplessly as her cubs struggled for survival. The situation was even more critical than they had imagined. The cubs had been trapped for what appeared to be several days. The mother's tracks around the shaft showed she had tried everything possible to reach them. The ground was torn up from her desperate attempts to dig, and broken branches scattered around showed she had tried to push them into the hole for her cubs to climb out. Sergeant Miller quickly assessed the cubs' condition. They were severely dehydrated and showing signs of hypothermia. The smaller cub wasn't moving much, only making weak whimpering sounds that broke the hearts of even the toughest soldiers present. The larger cub was slightly more active but clearly fading fast. The mother bear's behavior now made perfect sense. After exhausting every possible way to save her cubs, she had made an extraordinary decision: to seek help from the only creatures she knew might have the ability to reach them. Her intelligence in choosing a military base, with its equipment and trained personnel, showed remarkable instinct. Lieutenant Parker immediately radioed the base, requesting additional rescue equipment. They needed ropes, harnesses, and a portable heating system to prevent the cubs from going into shock during the rescue. Time was critical. The temperature was dropping rapidly as darkness approached. The team wasted no time in beginning their rescue operation. The shaft, stretching 15 feet deep into the frozen ground, presented numerous challenges. Its walls were slick with ice, and years of erosion had left the structure dangerously unstable. One wrong move could cause a complete collapse, burying the cubs forever. Lieutenant Parker ordered his team to quickly set up emergency lighting around the shaft's opening. The winter sun was already setting, casting long shadows through the trees. They needed to work fast, but rushing could prove fatal. The mother bear watched their every move, her breath creating small clouds in the cold air as she shifted anxiously from paw to paw. Sergeant Miller's assessment of the situation revealed more complications. The temperature at the bottom of the shaft was well below freezing, and the cubs had been exposed to these conditions for days. The walls were too narrow for an adult to safely descend, and using mechanical equipment might trigger a cave-in. They would need to rely on their basic rescue equipment and careful planning. The team unloaded their gear, creating a careful inventory of their resources. They had rescue ropes, harnesses, emergency blankets, and basic medical supplies. Using these simple tools, they would attempt something never before documented: the rescue of wild bear cubs from a mining shaft while their mother watched. The first step involved securing the area around the shaft. The soldiers carefully cleared away loose snow and debris, then set up a sturdy anchor point for their rescue ropes. Every movement was calculated, as the ground near the shaft's edge could crumble at any moment. The mother bear's constant presence added another layer of tension to their work. Creating a rescue harness for a bear cub required quick thinking and adaptation. The team modified their existing rescue equipment, using emergency blankets to create a secure cradle that could safely lift the cub without causing further stress or injury. The bigger challenge would be getting the frightened cub into the harness. The stronger cub, though weak from its ordeal, still showed signs of life. It tracked the movement of the rescue harness as it was lowered, letting out small whimpers that echoed up the shaft walls. The mother bear responded to these sounds with soft huffs of encouragement, somehow seeming to understand that this strange equipment was meant to help. Lowering the harness required steady hands and precise control. The team used a pulley system to ensure smooth movement, with 2 soldiers controlling the main line, while another handled the safety backup. The narrow shaft left little room for error. Any swing or sudden movement could injure the cub or damage the unstable walls. The most tense moment came when the harness finally reached the bottom. The stronger cub, despite its exhaustion, showed typical wild animal fear of the strange object. The team waited anxiously, watching as the cub slowly investigated the harness. Minutes felt like hours as they hoped the young bear would somehow understand this was its chance for survival. Whether by luck or instinct, the cub eventually moved into position. Perhaps encouraged by its mother's continued soft sounds from above, it settled into the makeshift cradle. The team seized this moment, carefully beginning the delicate process of securing the harness around the cub's weakened body. The mother bear's behavior during these crucial moments amazed everyone present. She remained calm, watching the rescue attempt with what seemed like understanding. Her only movements were small steps forward when her cub cried out, followed by quick steps back, as if reminding herself to trust these humans with her baby's life. The actual lifting of the cub became the most dangerous part of the rescue. Lieutenant Parker positioned his men carefully, 2 on the main rope, 2 handling safety lines, and 1 ready with medical supplies. The mother bear's growing anxiety was visible as her cub started moving upward. But she held her position, eyes fixed on her baby's ascent. Every inch of progress brought new challenges. The cub, frightened by the movement, began to struggle in the harness. Each twist and turn sent small showers of dirt and ice down the shaft walls. The team had to pause several times, letting the cub calm down before continuing. Any sudden movement could cause the shaft walls to crumble or the harness to tangle. The cold was making everything more difficult. The ropes had become stiff and harder to handle, and the soldiers' hands were growing numb despite their thick gloves. Ice had formed on parts of the shaft wall, creating dangerous spots where the harness could catch or tear. The team worked through these challenges with careful precision, knowing they couldn't afford any mistakes. Halfway up, they faced their first major crisis. A section of the wall suddenly broke loose, sending chunks of frozen earth falling toward the second cub below. The team had to make a split-second decision: continue lifting steadily or risk a faster pull that might save the cub from falling debris, but could destabilize the entire shaft. Parker's command came sharp and clear: maintain steady progress. His years of military experience told him that panic and rush decisions now could endanger both cubs. The soldiers trusted his judgment, continuing their careful lifting despite the heart-stopping sounds of debris hitting the shaft's bottom. The mother bear's reaction during this crisis proved extraordinary. When the wall collapsed, she moved forward instinctively, but then forced herself to stop. Her behavior showed remarkable trust, staying back even as her natural instincts must have been screaming to rush forward and help her cub. As the first cub neared the surface, new problems emerged. The cold air had caused ice to form on the rope, making it harder to grip. The team had to work in perfect coordination, adjusting their positions to maintain control while managing the increasingly slippery equipment. The cub's movement became more erratic as it neared the surface, sensing freedom but still trapped in the unfamiliar harness. After what seemed like hours but was actually about 40 minutes, the first cub finally reached the surface. The moment was tense. This would be the first time the mother bear would see humans handling her cub directly. The team moved with extreme caution, knowing that despite her previous restraint, maternal instincts could take over at any moment. Sergeant Miller took the lead, carefully removing the harness while speaking in soft, calm tones. The cub, though weak, showed signs of life that brought relief to everyone present. Its fur was matted with ice and dirt, but initial examination showed no serious injuries beyond exhaustion and cold exposure. The mother bear's reaction to seeing her first cub safely rescued was unlike anything the soldiers had ever witnessed. She approached cautiously, making soft sounds that her cub immediately responded to. After quickly checking her baby, she did something completely unexpected. She looked directly at Miller, then back at the shaft, clearly communicating that her second cub still needed help. The successful rescue of the first cub had taken a toll on both the team and the equipment. The ropes were showing signs of wear from ice and friction, and the shaft's condition had worsened. But there was no time to waste. The second cub, smaller and weaker than its sibling, was still trapped below, and its condition appeared far more critical. The situation with the second cub was far more dire. While the team had worked to rescue its sibling, the smaller cub had grown weaker, barely moving at the bottom of the shaft. The falling debris from the first rescue had made conditions worse. Partially burying the tiny bear in loose dirt and ice, time was running out. Lieutenant Parker knew they needed a different approach. The shaft's walls had become too unstable for another harness rescue, and the cub was too weak to help itself into the rescue equipment. After a quick assessment, he made a decision that went against all military protocol. Someone would have to go down into the shaft. The risks were enormous. The walls could completely collapse at any moment. The temperature was dropping dangerously low as night approached, and there was no guarantee the mother bear would remain calm with a human so close to her cub. Yet they had no choice. It was either attempt a direct rescue or watch the cub die. Sergeant Miller stepped forward without hesitation. As the team's wildlife expert, he had the best chance of handling the cub safely. The others quickly modified their rescue gear, creating a system that would lower Miller headfirst into the narrow opening while keeping him secured with multiple safety lines. The mother bear seemed to sense the increased urgency. She moved closer to the shaft, watching intently as they prepared Miller for his descent. Her behavior continued to amaze the team. Instead of showing aggression at this direct intervention, she maintained her unexpected trust in their efforts. Miller's descent was painfully slow. The shaft's walls crumbled with every movement, sending continuous streams of debris downward. The temperatures at the bottom were even colder than they had expected, and the space was so tight that Miller could barely move his arms. The beam from his headlamp revealed the frightening reality. Parts of the wall were already beginning to cave in. Reaching the cub proved to be just the beginning of their challenges. The small bear was partially buried and unresponsive. Miller had to work one-handed, trying to dig around the cub while maintaining his position in the shaft. Every movement brought more dirt and ice raining down, threatening to bury both him and the cub completely. Above ground, the situation was growing more tense. The mother bear had begun pacing, her soft sounds becoming more distressed as she sensed her cub's critical condition. The team monitored their safety lines carefully, knowing they were now responsible for 2 lives in the unstable shaft. The moment Miller finally reached the cub was both a relief and a new source of worry. The tiny bear was cold, its breathing shallow and irregular. He wrapped it quickly in an emergency thermal blanket, cradling it close to share his body heat. But now came the most dangerous part, the ascent. Just as they began pulling Miller and the cub up, disaster struck. A large section of the shaft wall suddenly gave way, sending a cascade of frozen earth downward. The team pulled faster, fighting against time and physics as the entire structure began to collapse around their comrade and his precious cargo. Miller's training kicked in. He curled his body around the cub, protecting it from the falling debris, as the team above pulled with everything they had. The mother bear's roars echoed through the clearing, but she held her position as if understanding that any interference now would doom both her cub and its rescuer. The final moments of the rescue turned into a desperate race against the collapsing shaft. The team pulled with everything they had, their muscles straining against the weight of Miller, the cub, and the falling debris. The sound of crumbling earth and cracking timber filled the air as the ancient mining shaft began its final collapse. Miller emerged from the shaft just seconds before it caved in completely, still clutching the motionless cub against his chest. The sudden rush of cold air hit them as the team quickly pulled them clear of the dangerous area. The shaft disappeared behind them, decades of abandonment finally claiming it in a cloud of dust and snow. But there was no time to celebrate the narrow escape. The cub wasn't breathing properly, its small body had become dangerously cold, and its heartbeat was weak and irregular. The mother bear's distress was obvious as she sensed her baby's critical condition, moving closer despite her fear of the humans. The team sprang into action, their military training adapting to this unprecedented situation. They quickly set up an emergency treatment area, using their portable heaters to create a warm space. The base's medical supplies, meant for human emergencies, would now be used to save a baby bear's life. Sergeant Miller, still covered in dirt and ice from the shaft, worked alongside the team's medic. They carefully cleaned the cub's airways, wrapped it in special thermal blankets, and began the delicate process of raising its body temperature. The mother bear watched every movement, her first cub now pressed against her side, both of them focusing intently on the humans working to save their family member. The next hours became a fierce battle against time and cold. The team worked in shifts, maintaining constant care while checking the cub's vital signs. They used warm water bottles, heating pads, and even their own body heat to slowly bring the cub's temperature back to normal. Each small improvement was celebrated, each setback met with renewed determination. Through it all, the mother bear remained close, her behavior becoming even more remarkable. When the cub showed signs of distress, she would make soft sounds that seemed to calm it. When the soldiers needed to adjust their medical equipment, she would step back slightly, as if giving them space to work. Her trust in these humans, once her natural enemies, never wavered. As midnight approached, the team faced another challenge. Their emergency supplies were running low, and the cub still needed constant care. Lieutenant Parker made a quick decision, radioing the base to send additional medical supplies and equipment for an extended field operation. They would stay with these bears as long as necessary. The darker moments came when the cub's breathing would become irregular, causing panic among both the humans and the mother bear. During one particularly frightening episode, the tiny bear stopped breathing completely. The team's medic performed a delicate procedure to clear its airways, while everyone present held their breath. The mother bear's reaction was heartbreaking. She made soft, almost pleading sounds, reaching out toward her cub but holding back, somehow understanding that the humans were its best chance for survival. By morning, both cubs showed remarkable improvement. The smaller cub had begun to move and respond, while its sibling had regained enough strength to take water. The mother bear's relief was visible in her relaxed posture and gentle interactions with her babies. Over the next 3 days, the team maintained their camp, providing constant care while the cubs recovered. The mother bear stayed close, gradually accepting food and water from the soldiers. Her trust had created an unprecedented bond between wild animal and humans. When the cubs were finally strong enough to walk, the mother bear prepared to lead them back into the wilderness. But before leaving, she did something extraordinary. She approached Lieutenant Parker, stopping just feet away, and held his gaze for several long moments. Then, with a soft huff, she turned and led her cubs into the forest, disappearing among the trees. The incident changed military protocol in the region forever. The base launched a complete survey of abandoned mining sites, securing dozens of similar hazards. They established new wildlife response procedures, emphasizing assessment and rescue over immediate defensive actions. Years later, soldiers at the base would occasionally spot a large female bear with 2 healthy cubs in the distance. While they couldn't be certain it was the same family, these bears never showed aggression toward humans. Instead, they seemed to share a unique understanding with the base personnel. The story of the mother bear's incredible trust and the soldiers' brave rescue spread throughout military and wildlife conservation circles. It proved that sometimes the greatest acts of courage come from believing in the good of others, even those we're taught to fear. What would you have done in Lieutenant Parker's position? Would you have trusted your instincts and helped the desperate mother bear? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for reading. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible true stories of remarkable animal encounters.